All right, welcome everybody tonight to Bible study as we can continue on in our series of Grace for the Afflicted, how mental health is presented in the Bible, and how we can draw encouragement from it. Again, I'm doing this based on the work of Dr. Matthew Stanford. I think that he wrote a book that balances perfectly the clinical definition of some of these personality disorders, how it is balanced with the Bible, what the Bible has to say about that. And so, early when we first started this series, I said this. I said that everyone has something wrong with them. And so tonight's lesson, we're going to look at it because it has to deal with personalities, different personality disorders. Everyone in the world has a personality. So before we get started with that, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we want to give you praise and glory tonight as we can come to your house, Lord, on this Wednesday night, study your word, Lord, to look at mental health issues, Lord, that are of today and back then as well. But Lord, we also want to look for you as our strength and, Lord, as you are as our healer. Lord, whether you choose to heal through medications, heal through other people with counseling, Lord, or there's no stopping you from touching a person and healing them by your word. Lord, help us tonight as we go through this, Lord. And Lord, you know everyone's prayer request. Lord, we ask that you be with Pastor Troy as he is traveling back, that you protect him, Lord, and be with people tonight, Lord. The prayer requests they may have on their hearts, Lord, you know what they are. Lord, we ask that you meet them according to your grace and glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, like I said earlier, everybody has a different personality. Now, what kind of sets us apart is that there are some traits in those personalities that when they're not attended to can get in the way of people, get in the way of a lot of different things. So we're going to look at some of those ways tonight. So some of the characteristic symptoms. Personality disorders are characterized by long-lasting, rigid pattern of maladaptive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Like I said, everyone has a personality, but there are times where situations may occur where our personality then gets in our own way. This enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior deviates markedly from the expectations of the individual's culture. So each person has a different culture, and not just we have a Suri here tonight. A Suri is from Cambodia. I mean that's a different type of culture, but there is different cultures in amongst family, in amongst how different parts of the country. When I moved over here from Pennsylvania, I noticed that Minnesota had a different culture. And if you would come to Pennsylvania, you would realize that we have a different culture. Cultures can vary from family to family. Like, for example, on Christmas, how many would open their presents on Christmas Eve? Howard, yeah? How many would wait till Christmas morning? See, I was like that too, Allie. But Christmas morning was our family's way of opening our Christmas present. So each have different culture. Now, because of the inflexibility and persuasiveness of these patterns, they cause serious relational problems and impairment of functioning for the affected individual. So sometimes a person has a very strong personality. It could get in the way of forming relationships, get in the way of functioning, get in the way of going to work, going to school, whatever is in a person's life. Now, the characteristic symptoms of the personality disorders fall into 4 categories. So the first one is distorted thinking, which is an extreme and inaccurate pattern perceiving and interpreting oneself, others, and the world around them. Examples of distorted thinking patterns include idealizing, then devaluating another person or one's own self, extreme black or white thinking, being distrustful, suspicious thoughts, unusual or odd beliefs that are contrary to his cultural norms, thoughts that include perceptual distortions and body illusions. So some of the examples of this. There are some people with their type of thinking, it's either one way or the other way. Two extremes. There's no room for the middle. That's the black and white thinking. There's no room for the gray. It's either this way or that way. They have a hard time feeling out that it could be something totally different from what those two extremes are. Distrustful, not trusting anyone, or knowing that people are out to get them. It almost sounds like paranoid thoughts. In a way, it could be, but coming out and not trusting or very, very distrustful somebody, having suspicious thoughts, unusual or odd beliefs that are contrary to cultural norms. Again, thoughts or beliefs that are not normally believed by the culture, by the people, but yet they believe them. I have this relative once, I think he's dead now, but he believed that he could control the weather. And he had this belief all the time. And I mean, at the time, okay, he's just kind of odd that way. Didn't think much of it, but probably looking back, he was probably had a mental illness that probably went either undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. Another one here is thoughts that include perceptual distortions of body illusion. Now, I see this sometimes with especially with the ladies we get at work. Some of the clients, some people, and you probably heard this. If they look into the mirror, they totally see a totally different person. They have body image issues, and a lot of times they could go and restrict food, binging and purging, eat a lot of food, and then go a few minutes later and throw it all up. Some of the women that suffer from these distortions of their body, and if you say to them, "Hey, you look fine, you look wonderful," they won't believe you. And I've come across several of these young ladies where I work over the years. And no matter what you could do, say to them, "You look fine, you're a pretty girl," or whatever, they would not accept that. They always see themselves as being overweight, or they'll focus on maybe a body part that is not up to spec, for what they believe, and focus on that. So I see that. The second one is emotional dysregulation, which is the inability to modulate the range, intensity, the ability, and appropriateness of emotional responses. So people who are emotionally dysregulated could just get upset over the drop of a hat, or get angry, flare up, just like this, without any real cause. And there are people that have a hard time controlling the intensity of some of those emotions. There are some times where it's just the opposite. Something that should elicit an emotional response, sometimes for some people don't. I have seen people, say if I show like a funny video at work, and it is funny, people laugh. Some people will just look at it, and that, it won't affect them. They'll just have almost like a blank stare on their face. They won't laugh at something funny. Some personality disorders are characterized by emotional sensitivity and a tendency to experience intense feelings. For example, Say Howard and I, after church one day, we're going to go out to lunch together. But Howard gets an emergency and he has to cancel. And an intense person would treat that as a rejection from Howard. And maybe Howard had a legitimate excuse to cancel the lunch, but the person doesn't see it that way. They feel totally rejected by that. Also, other disordered individuals show little or no emotional response, regardless of the situation or circumstance. If you look at some of the like science fiction shows like Star Trek, of course, Mr. Spock is a good example of someone who's Vulcan, he has emotions, but he doesn't show them. There are some people that show no emotion, whether it's something that can make them happy or something to make them sad. They just have no emotion. Another area is impulse control problems. Impulse control is the degree to which a person can regulate their internal drives or impulses to act. Some personality disorders are characterized by behavioral over-control and inability to act, while others are characterized by a lack of behavioral control, acting spontaneously without forethought. So here is something here. Sometimes there's a crisis. Some people might freeze. And I think, Kim, you told us a story a couple of Sundays ago where a firefighter was called into action, and he had a panic attack, and he couldn't do anything. So having a type of not knowing what to do. To the other extreme, some people have really impulse, and they'll do stuff. Like, for example, again, with a lot of mental health issues, a lot of times they can overlap in different areas. And someone could have an impulse to say, hey, if I go to a store, I might have the impulse to steal something. And they do. I had a client like that where we worked. He was caught several times shoplifting, and she was banned from several stores. So one day, we had to order her meds through a Walgreens, and so I had to go pick them up, and she wanted to come with me. I told her I didn't feel comfortable with you coming with me because I don't want her to steal something while I was at Walgreens cleaning up her medication. I didn't want to be the getaway driver. So she stayed back, and I went there. But there are some people that have that impulse to steal. There are some people where you hear that old expression, look before you leap, very cautious. Other people leap before they look. No problem. And a lot of times, personality disorders cause a lot of interpersonal difficulties that are common to all of the personality disorders. Distorted thinking, emotional dysregulation, and impulse control problems make it difficult for personality disordered individuals to form and maintain healthy relationships. And I've seen a lot of this at work, especially with people and some of their families. So sometimes, we do get visitors. Our clients' families do come to visit. Sometimes you can see the struggle between the family and the person with mental health issues. And also, too, I also seen this, too, at work, too, where if a person has a strong personality, they may make it so that it's hard to be around them. And I've worked with some people like that. It's hard to be around them because some of their personalities come off so strong, they almost come off as rude or abrasive. Now, there are some people where they lack discretion. They'll tell you to your face what's wrong with you. And a lot of personality problems can develop within people, families, and anyone having a relationship with anybody. So some of the diagnoses. Descriptions of personality differences and problems were clearly and commonly found in the earliest medical, philosophical, and religious writings of ancient culture. So once again, this was recognized way back then. And again, the problem is with that back then, that their level of understanding, they didn't have the in-depth study as we do today, over years of experience and looking back at it. So the modern description of personality disorders is generally attributed to an 18th century French physician, Philippe Pinel. Pinel described a group of patients who were mentally unimpaired, but nonetheless engaged in impulsive and self-defeating behavior. There are times where we see that even today. I mean, it never stopped, where people's personalities get in the way. Now, the DSM-5, which is the latest edition of the manual that professionals, psychiatrists, and therapists use to diagnose different mental health disorders, they list 10 personality disorders into 3 clusters based on similar symptoms and clinical presentation. So that there are 3 main clusters of personality disorders. And each and every one of us will fit into one of these categories, I guarantee it. Now, your personality issues here, or your symptoms, may not get to the point where they're that disabling to you. They won't disable your functioning, but sometimes they may get in the way sometimes. So the first one is called the Cluster A personality disorders, and the common features of the disorder is social awkwardness, social withdrawal, and distorted thinking. So some of the personalities is, number 1, will be the paranoid personality disorder, which is characterized by a pattern of distrust and suspiciousness that others' motives are interpreted as hostile or malicious. Individuals with paranoid personality disorder falsely believe they are being victimized by others. They are highly critical of others, yet hypersensitive to criticism of themselves. So again, people with this type of a paranoid personality disorder, and I see a lot of this at work, are always suspicious of somebody else. Like, for instance, they may say, again, Suri and Allie, you might invite someone over. Hey, come over, just have some dinner or have a lunch. And they might, okay, what is your intention? There must be something behind this. What's going on here? What are they trying to do to me? So being very suspicious of something. A lot of times, people in conversation are awkward. They don't know what to say. Sometimes they may feel uncomfortable talking, or totally back away and not talk at all. At work, I run into a lot of people with paranoia, and they're the type of people that think that they're being tracked all the time when there's no evidence of it. Although if you have a smartphone and your location is on, you get tracked, but more deeper than that. Some people feel maybe they have a chip in their head. That people can read their thoughts. Again, some of these symptoms cross over into other areas. These are very common. Another one here is called the Schizoid personality disorder, which is characterized by a long-standing pattern of detachment from social relationships. Individuals with schizoid personality disorder display a restricted range of emotions, rarely experiencing emotional extremes such as anger or joy. Again, earlier I talked about this. If I show you a funny video, the natural response would be to laugh. There are people that would show no emotion to that at all. Everyone can be laughing at it. This person won't laugh at all. They have a stunted emotion. They don't express emotion. Isotypal personality disorder is characterized by a pattern of acute discomfort in close relationships, cognitive or perceptual distortions, and eccentric behavior. If anyone ever watched Seinfeld, Kramer would probably fit in this category. You know who that is, the character Kramer. He would probably fit into that. Some have odd behavior, just weird stuff. Individuals with schizotypal personality disorder often hold odd beliefs or superstitions, distort reality, and are unable to form close relationships. We have superficial relationships, but nothing close. Some people might have these odd superstitions, and I remember. I mean, probably when you were younger, you would carry a rabbit's foot, a lucky charm. Well, there are some people that would believe in just superstition and believe it religiously. Like, for instance, I don't know, maybe someone, well, if it rains on a Tuesday, you don't go anywhere. I don't know if that's a thing or not. But for some people, that might be. If it rains on Tuesday, you don't go anywhere. Some beliefs just like that. That's the cluster A personality disorder. The cluster B personality disorders, the common features of these disorders include a lack of impulse control and problems with emotion regulation. This is where sometimes they do things without thinking, more of the leap before you look, and they have a hard time keeping their emotions in check. They could go from one extreme to the other at a drop of a hat. The first one is the antisocial personality disorder. Now, in this case, antisocial does not mean you don't want to socialize people. There are some people that are shy and quiet, kind of prefer to be by themselves. That's not what we're talking about here. Antisocial personality disorder is characterized by a pattern of behavior that involves manipulation, exploitation, or violation of the rights of others. Individuals with antisocial personality disorder are often deceitful, lack remorse for their actions, and show an unwillingness to conform to the social norms and laws. People like this category would be like the kind of scam artists that would go and date women and then go drain their bank account and then move on to the next victim. Those are the antisocial type. They can be very charming, people can be drawn to them, but they're out to get people, and they feel no remorse for hurting somebody, and they will not blink an eye at breaking the law or going over the rights of others for their own personal gain. I ran into this a couple times at work. A few of our patients came in with antisocial personality disorder, and a few of them there, and pretty much kind of had to watch yourself around them, but you had to recognize it for what it is. The second area, and I see this a lot at work, called borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by a persistent pattern of emotional instability, volatile interpersonal relationships, unstable self-image, and self-destructive impulse behaviors. So borderline personality disorder people, most of the time, they are women, but there could be also men as well, where a lot of it comes from a background of abuse, and at one minute, they'll say that they love you, the very next minute, they hate you. Their emotions are out of control. They can love you once, turn, hate you, then love you again. They have a hard time controlling their impulses. They act and do things on impulse. They look before they leap before they look. A histrionic personality disorder is characterized by a pattern of excessive emotional expression and attention seeking. Individuals with HPD often behave dramatically in situations that do not justify this type of reaction. They have an excessive need for approval and are often inappropriately sexually seductive or provocative. And finally, there's a narcissistic personality disorder, which is characterized by extreme feelings of self-importance, a high need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. Individuals with narcissistic personality disorder often exploit others for their own gain and are overly sensitive to criticism, judgment, or defeat. Now, how many of you, I know that Suri and Ellie, you like to watch a lot of PBS? Do you remember watching that one British sitcom, what's it called, with Mrs. Bucket, Keeping Up Appearances? Anybody ever see that show? Well, the main character on this show, Mrs. Bucket, would be an example of the narcissistic personality disorder. She thought she was much better class than what she was. And she would kind of overly play it up. Well, Archie Bunker, he's a different character all of himself. Finally, the personality disorders in cluster C, and this common feature is a high level anxiety. The first one is the avoidant personality disorder. It's characterized by a pattern of social inhibition, feelings of inadequacy, hypersensitivity to negative evaluation. Individuals with avoidant personality disorder are extremely shy and fearful of rejection, making it difficult for them to interact socially and professionally. So, those who are what people say not socializing are more likely to be avoidant. They avoid social interaction. They avoid large crowds. They may feel more comfortable in the smaller crowds or with people that they know. And for the avoidant personality disorder people, those who have it, loss and rejection are so painful, the individual will often choose to be lonely rather than risk trying to connect with others. I found that very interesting. They don't feel comfortable in social settings at all, especially with amongst strangers. But they might feel a little bit more comfortable when they know people. Another one in this category is called the dependent personality disorder. It's a pattern of submissive and clinging behavior related to an excessive need to be taken care of. Individuals with DPD often feel helpless or or unable to cope independently. They always got to be with somebody, someone to take care of them. Frequently and appropriately transferring responsibility for their situation or well-being onto another. And then finally, in this category, are the obsessive compulsive personality disorder. The pattern of preoccupation with orderliness, perfectionism, and control. Individuals with OCD are preoccupied with details, rules, and schedules to the point that any joy in an activity is lost. Their extreme level of perfectionism often interferes with the ability to complete tasks. So those are the three personality clusters. Does any one of them sound familiar either for you or for someone you know? You probably can find yourself or someone you know in one of these categories. So again, some of the risk factors of why these happen. Again, a lot of these risk factors are the same for a lot of mental illness, very similar. And because someone goes through these things in their own personal life does not necessarily mean that they'll come out with a mental health disorder, but there's a lot of commonality in some of these. So again, premature birth weight, adverse caregiving, someone not getting adequate care, emotional or physical maltreatment or neglect, sexual abuse, parental loss or divorce, diagnosis of ADHD, a family history of personality disorders or other mental illnesses, a low level of education, and a low socioeconomic status. So getting back to the personality disorders, again, we all have a personality. And depending on which one you are, there are times where things about your personality can get in your way. Other times it's no problem at all. But we're going to see two examples in the Bible whose thoughts and behavior suggest that they are suffering from personality disorders. And both of the descriptions are of the cluster B, personality disorder. And remember, going back here, cluster B, the commonality of that is include a lack of impulse control and problems with emotion regulation. So sometimes, again, they leaped before they looked, and they had a hard time with their emotions, adjusting their emotions, or keeping their emotions in check. We're going to take a look at two different people of the Bible. So the first one is Samson. Samson is an example of someone with antisocial personality disorder. Now again, antisocial in this case does not mean that he was shy and didn't like to socialize. He took advantage of people, and he really did. So we're taking a look at some of the things he did. So one of the characteristics of a person who has antisocial personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of disregard for and the violation of the rights of others. So he has a failure to conform to social norms with respect to the law. So Samson, what does he do? He violates the Jewish dietary laws. He touches dead animals. He took the honey from, remember the carcass of the lion? He took the honey from that carcass, a dead animal. He wasn't supposed to touch it. He violates the Nazirite law. Remember the Nazirite law? He was not supposed to cut his hair, and he ended up having his hair cut. He breaks that. He's deceitful. He burns the Philistine fields. He's impulsivity, irritability, and aggressiveness. He kills people for revenge and was arrested. He doesn't tell his parents about the unclean honey. He has a reckless disregard for safety of self and others. He used riddles to trick groomsmen. Lack of remorse. He married a Philistine girl. Remember, Israelites were not supposed to intermarry with foreign women. He killed 30 men in anger, burned the fields, abandoned his wife, visited a prostitute in Gaza, told Delilah the secret of his strength, committed suicide, abandoned his wife, but returns later. So there are examples of some of his behavior and the symptoms that lead to indicate that Samson was antisocial type personality. A little bit disregard for the law, deceived people, manipulated people to get his way. Remember, he told his parents, there's a woman over there, go and get her for me. Very deceitful. Now, the other example of a person is Gomer. Gomer, if you remember, it's not Gomer Pyle USMC, but actually Gomer was a woman, and this woman was a prostitute. And God told his prophet Hosea to go and marry this woman. Now, back in those days, God will often have his prophets do things in real life to show Israel what was going to happen. In this case, the prostitute Gomer represented the people of Israel being unfaithful to God. So God tells Hosea, the prophet, to go marry this woman. And so he did. And so some of the characteristics of people with borderline personality disorder, we'll see how Gomer had these same type of symptoms and behaviors. So a symptom might be a frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. She sought out adulterous relationships to meet her needs. She had multiple short-term relationships, patterns of unstable and intense personal relationships. She abandoned her family, relational and emotional instability. Remember, she and Hosea had a couple of children, and there was one child that they weren't sure whether Hosea was the actual father of this child. He had identity disturbance, inconsistency in behavior, lack of commitment to values, self-damaging impulsiveness, sexual promiscuity, prostitution, drunkenness, and then self-mutilation. She cut herself. And certainly one of the hallmark symptoms of a person with a borderline personality disorder, them do some kind of a self-injurious behavior. A lot of times it is cutting. They'll take a sharp object and cut their arm, and usually it's not a suicide attempt, because some of the cuts are not that deep at all. It's more like scratches, but they do it because they have an ability to feel, and sometimes cutting makes them feel something. Now, sometimes a person can not be very careful and cut deeper than they should, and then they need some medical attention. But I've seen a lot of this at work throughout my years there. Some people have a habit of cutting themselves. Others can burn themselves or hurt themselves in other ways. Pound their head against the wall. We had some people, get this theory, would even swallow razor blades. And we had a gal that did that. We had to take her to the emergency room where they had to do a surgery to get those razor blades out. So you see a lot of times people will hurt themselves, injure themselves. Now, in order to wrap this up for tonight, each one of us has personality. Sometimes we think, well, maybe my personality gets in the way. And I thought about this too, because there are times where, I may be very shy. How can God use a shy person like me that sometimes don't know what the words to say to anybody? But I look back at this. God called Moses to go lead his people out of Egypt. What did Moses say to God? I can't speak right. My lips falter. But what was God's response? Who made the lips? Who made the lips? And so you might say, God, I don't got the greatest personality. So there are some preachers out there, some evangelists that have a great personality that can just preach the word of God and do it eloquently, have the words to say, can do all the right things. But yet there are some people that have a hard time getting words out. Who made the personality? God could use Moses' faltering lips. God can use the faltering personality of a person. So, here's the two lessons about personality disorders from the lives of Samson and Gomer. First, a personality disorder does not disqualify an individual from a relationship with or service to God. Just as God has used different people that you would never expect them to be used by God, but God used them for his glory. God used a stuttering man named Moses to lead his people out of there. God used the foolishness to bring about salvation to his people. God uses various mistakes and poor decisions from both Samson and Gomer to draw both of them and the Israelites to himself. Now, the mistakes that Samson made and Gomer made, they had some legitimate consequences for them. There's no mistake about that. But God used those to continue to draw them to him. Now, I'm going to say this. Sometimes, folks, we make bad decisions. We do the wrong thing. Sometimes we got to face the consequences from those things. But God still loves us. God still draws us to him. God's will is clearly sovereign over the wrong thinking and accurate perceptions associated with personality disorders. So, sometimes when we mess up, it does not thwart God's plans. God will still get his plan done. It may be, take us a little bit longer, but we'll eventually get there. Just like this. When you go on a trip, you have a GPS device. I have a Garmin. There's other things there. You put the destination you want to go. Magenta line will show up. Be on this route. Now that is good, but there are times where it may not pick up roadblocks or some road construction. It might have a detour. And sometimes when we mess up, we go on a little detour. It might take us a little bit longer. Got to go through a different way, which we didn't plan it, but we always get to where we're going. Sometimes, we make mistakes. We're human. I'm not trying to make an excuse for that, but God can, again, use our weaknesses. Second, God is actively seeking those who struggle with personality disorder, longs for an intimate relationship with them. Again, folks, I I believe that God can touch someone, heal them at His word, just like He can do that with someone with a physical illness. A lot of times we struggle with it because in the struggle is where we learn to depend on God instead of ourselves. We see our own inadequacies. We look to God and say, God, I can't do this. I need your strength to do this. And I do believe this, that even though we have these personalities, we all have personalities, also we can learn how to overcome some of the negative aspects of it. Again, growing up, I was very shy, hard to speak to anyone. But over the years, I learned how to speak, become a little bit more comfortable talking to strangers. Even though it's still uncomfortable for me, I'm able to do it. And it's God. It's not me. So whatever things you may be struggling with, that God can use that again for His glory. Because who made the personality? God did. All right. So after tonight, we have 3 more lessons of this, and then with that we'll finish up. Do you have any questions or comments before we go on?